Angela stepped into the sterile hospital suite, the cold air almost stinging her skin. The faint scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mingling with something more metallic, sickly sweet, like iron left too long in the rain. Her eyes scanned the room, every detail meticulously in place, from the soft hum of the high-end medical equipment to the polished mahogany panels that masked the machinery's bulk. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors, their signals a steady, mechanical heartbeat, cold and detached. In the background, the muffled murmurs of nurses passing by in the hallway seeped in, but inside Blackwell's suite, the quiet was deafening. The only movement came from the occasional twitch of Victor Blackwell's fingers, his hand resting on the plush sheets, limp, weak. The billionaire lay in a bed that looked more like a king's throne than a medical necessity. His body, however, betrayed the luxury of his surroundings. The suite, designed to look like an upscale hotel room, offered comfort, but his appearance, pale, gaunt, belied the lavish decor. Machines surrounded him, each one displaying alarming numbers that fluctuated too wildly to offer any comfort. Victor Blackwell, the man who had once thrived in the fast-paced world of tech, now lay motionless, his chest rising and falling slowly, as though each breath required more effort than the last. His once sharp features were now sunken, eyes dull and unfocused, as if the life was slowly draining from him. His lips, normally confident and full, were now cracked and pale, barely forming the words that had once commanded boardrooms.
Hey, my amazing family. I've missed you all so much, and I've missed all the incredible experiences we've shared. It's been a bit of a roller coaster lately with some technical challenges, but don't worry, we're working hard to get everything back on track. Your support means the world to me right now, so please stick with me. Thank you for standing by my side, my wonderful story family. If you're ready to dive into today's story and have a blast, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I've got something just as exciting lined up for tomorrow, and you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get into it.
Angela moved through the room, her cleaning cart rolling quietly behind her. She kept her head low, trying not to draw attention to herself, but her mind was sharp, sharper than it had ever been in this position. She noticed the small details, the things others overlooked. Her eyes landed on Blackwell's yellowing fingernails, an unusual sign she recognized from her toxicology studies. Her breath caught as she observed the thinning patches of hair at his temples, a slow, deliberate pattern she knew well. He wasn't just sick. He was dying in a way that seemed far too specific. But it wasn't the hair or the nails that stopped her dead in her tracks. It was the gums, the delicate, swollen tissue surrounding his teeth. She'd seen it before, years ago in textbooks. The subtle signs of thallium poisoning. Angela's pulse quickened. Her hands trembled as she wiped the polished surface beside his bed. Why had no one seen this before? She knew the symptoms weren't just coincidental. Everything about Blackwell's condition screamed one thing: thallium. Angela stepped closer, her heart thumping in her chest, matching the rhythm of the monitor. The beeping grew louder, faster, almost like a warning. She looked at the chart again, the symptoms still puzzling the doctors: neurological breakdown, liver failure, muscle atrophy. No one had connected the dots. No one but her. Her thoughts raced as she connected the dots. Who could have missed this? The doctors? The specialists? It was as if they were all blind to what was so glaringly obvious. Was it possible that they were so wrapped up in their theories that they couldn't see the truth right in front of them? As she checked the bottle of hand cream next to the bed, her stomach twisted. The placement was almost too deliberate. Each time Burke visited, the cream was placed with care, like it was part of a ritual. But what if it wasn't comfort he was bringing? What if it was poison? She took a step back,
glancing at the door, knowing the clock was ticking. The doctors were nowhere to be seen, and it was clear Blackwell's time was running out. Angela held her breath, looking at the man who could still be saved if someone would just listen. "What would you do if you saw something the doctors missed?" Angela whispered, half to herself, half to the empty room. Would she risk everything to make them see it? Comment below. What would you do?
Angela moved through the sterile halls of the hospital, her cleaning cart quietly rolling behind her. The endless white tiles reflected the fluorescent lights above, a constant buzz that became as familiar as her own heartbeat. She had memorized the scent of antiseptic by now, a sharp, almost metallic scent that clung to everything in this place. It was a hospital, yes, but to Angela, it was a reminder of what she could never be, a part of the world of those who could afford luxury, success, or recognition. The monotony of her night shifts had long since worn into her routine. The hum of machines in the background, the soft shuffle of her shoes on the tile, and the quiet rhythm of her work. She moved from room to room, wiping down counters, dusting surfaces, invisible to the doctors, patients, and staff alike. She had learned to keep her head low, to be as unnoticed as possible. It was easier that way. The less attention she drew, the safer she felt. But in the quiet, while she worked, her mind never truly stopped. Angela remembered the days when she was a star in the chemistry department at Johns Hopkins University, back when her future felt limitless, her potential obvious. Those days felt like a dream now, a distant memory of who she could have been. In a flash, the hospital hallway blurred, and Angela found herself back in the lecture hall. The clang of test tubes, the sharp, clear voice of her professor, and the hum of scientific discussion filled the air. She was there again, a young woman in the front row, her hand shooting up to answer questions, her mind buzzing with possibilities. Her lab partner looked at her in awe as she quickly mixed chemicals, her instincts leading her to a discovery before the textbook could even explain it.
"You've got the mind of a true scientist," the professor had said, his voice filled with praise. Angela could have been someone. She could have gone anywhere, achieved anything. But life had a way of interrupting her dreams. Now, instead of testing theories or breaking new ground in science, Angela scrubbed the floors of the very hospital where the brightest minds failed to see what was in front of them. Her intelligence, her talent, was invisible now. Her degree was never completed. Life had taken over. A car accident had shattered her family, and at the age of 22, Angela found herself forced to leave school and take on the responsibility of caring for her younger siblings. She never made it back to the lab. She never got the chance to finish what she had started. And now, every time she wiped down another sterile counter or polished another unremarkable surface, her dreams seemed further out of reach. Angela paused as Dr. Thaddeus Reynolds, the head specialist, walked briskly past her. He didn't even look at her. She was invisible. The distinguished doctor, who held the power to save lives, didn't notice the woman who cleaned his hospital, even as she noticed things he never would. She stood back against the wall, keeping to the shadows, her hands still holding the rag. The faintest flash of irritation ran through her veins, but she suppressed it, as she always did. She wasn't meant to be seen. Later, she watched as Jefferson Burke, the businessman and former rival of Victor Blackwell, walked into the suite with that same careful indifference. He wasn't even looking at her as he placed the exclusive Swiss hand cream on the nightstand. His movements were so precise, so deliberate, but Angela noticed the details no one else did. His careful touch, his insistence on positioning the jar just so. It was almost as if he was marking territory. To anyone else, he was just a businessman. But to Angela, he was another reminder of the distance between her world and theirs.
As Angela wiped down the windowsill, a flash of memory hit her. She remembered the night of the accident like it had just happened. The screeching tires, the twisted metal, and the sickening thud that still echoed in her mind. Her parents were gone, and Angela's life had shifted instantly. There was no time for grieving, no time to chase dreams. Now, as she worked, she caught a glimpse of a young intern passing by, his face full of the ambition Angela used to have. He was on his way to success, and yet here she was, cleaning his path, invisible once more. The anger and frustration she kept buried for so long began to surface. What would her life have been like if she hadn't been forced to give up everything? She glanced at her worn shoes, the cleaning cart in front of her. This wasn't where she was supposed to be, not with the mind she had. As she continued her work, Dr. Reynolds brushed past her again, not even acknowledging her presence. She overheard fragments of his conversation with a colleague. They didn't know her, didn't see her, and yet she could see everything. They were debating Blackwell's condition, throwing out theories while ignoring the most obvious one, something Angela already knew. But she was the cleaner, the invisible worker. No one listened to her, not even when she had the answers they were searching for. She exhaled slowly, her gaze lingering on the door to Blackwell's suite, where a team of specialists was once again gathered. They had no idea what was killing him, but Angela knew.
Angela's cart squeaked as she pushed it past the dimly lit corridors, the low hum of the hospital's machinery accompanying her every step. The night shift had settled into its usual rhythm, the silence broken only by the distant echo of a nurse's footsteps. She paused outside Victor Blackwell's suite, taking a moment to gather herself before entering. Inside, the soft beeping of the monitors was the only sign of life from the Billionaire, each beep slower than the last, like the pulse of someone on the edge of existence. Her eyes flickered to Blackwell's chart on the bedside table. She had seen the file countless times before, but tonight something felt different. She studied the medical updates carefully: neurodegenerative symptoms, liver dysfunction, and unexplained weight loss. But as she glanced over the chart, a cold shiver ran down her spine. There was a pattern to the symptoms, something that wasn't right. It was too familiar. Her breath caught in her throat as the pieces began to fall into place. She focused on the small details, the yellowing fingernails, the thinning hair, the way his body had started to bloat, the pale gums. Her mind flashed back to her university days, her chemistry textbooks, the lectures on poisons, the textbook perfect symptoms of thallium poisoning. It was all there, in front of her, laid out like a puzzle she had solved 1,000 times before. The realization struck her like a lightning bolt. It wasn't just coincidence. She knew exactly what was happening to Victor Blackwell. Someone had been poisoning him, slowly, deliberately, and with a precision that matched her studies. She moved closer, inspecting the hand cream on the nightstand, noting its careful placement. The cream. It had appeared every day, always the same brand, brought by Blackwell's former rival, Jefferson Burke. Each time, Burke made sure it was placed prominently on the table, as if it were a token of affection. But Angela now saw it for what it was: the delivery system for the poison.
The pieces clicked together, one after another. Thallium. Subtle, colorless, odorless. A poison that was almost impossible to detect unless specifically sought out. It was perfect, slow, insidious, and impossible to trace unless someone with the right knowledge noticed the signs. Angela stood frozen, her heart racing. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, but her mind was clouded with fear. What could she do? She was just a housekeeper. She wasn't a doctor. Even if she was right, who would listen to her? They were the experts, the specialists. They had the credentials, the knowledge, the experience. And she? She was the invisible woman who scrubbed floors and dusted rooms. A wave of panic hit her. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the nightstand. The thought of speaking up terrified her. She had seen it happen before. When she tried to offer help or speak her mind, she was always dismissed, her words dismissed as if they were unimportant. What if this time was no different? But something inside her, something deep, something that had been dormant for too long, began to stir. Victor Blackwell was dying, and she knew how to save him. She had the knowledge to stop this slow death, but at what cost? Her mind spun with the weight of the decision. If she spoke up, she would risk everything. Her job, her security, the fragile stability she had built for her family, gone in an instant. But how could she live with herself, knowing that she had the answer and did nothing? She glanced back at Blackwell, his breathing shallow, his life hanging by a thread. She could stay silent, keep her head down, and continue cleaning the rooms she had always cleaned. Or she could act, risk everything, and save a life. The battle raged within her. She thought of her children at home, of the life she had fought to give them. Was it worth the gamble? To risk her career, her future, just to do what was right? Her mind flashed to the years she spent studying, to the dreams she had to give up when her family needed her the most. She had never stopped thinking like a scientist. That sharp, analytical mind was still there, buried beneath the layers of dust and rejection, waiting for a chance to break through. Her gaze hardened, and for the first time in years, she felt that old fire spark inside her. She had to act. Angela turned away from Blackwell's bed and walked toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of her decision was pulling her down. She glanced at the hallway, empty, silent. But in her mind, the noise of her thoughts grew louder. What if she was wrong? What if they dismissed her again? But she knew she had to try. She paused at the door and looked back at the man in the bed. Victor Blackwell, his life in her hands. The decision was made. What would you risk to save a life? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. Could she do it? Could she risk everything for someone who would never know how much it cost her to speak the truth? What would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Would you risk everything for someone you barely know? The hospital had a rhythm. The beeping of the machines, the steady murmur of voices in the hallways, the mechanical shuffle of shoes against tile. But Angela was starting to hear something else. The pattern. It was subtle at first, like a soft tapping at the back of her mind. Victor Blackwell's condition didn't just worsen over time. It worsened after Jefferson Burke's visits. Every time Burke came in, always with that expensive jar of hand cream, Blackwell's symptoms escalated. Coincidence? Angela knew better. She began to monitor Blackwell's room more carefully, lingering a little longer, watching from the edges of the sterile walls. The doctors came and went, oblivious. They argued over his liver enzymes, his neurological symptoms, but never mentioned the possibility that something else, something environmental, might be poisoning him. Meanwhile, Blackwell's condition went from bad to worse. One evening, Angela noticed his eyes, bloodshot, his pupils dilated. When Burke entered the room, carrying the familiar black jar of Swiss hand cream, Angela felt a familiar knot in her stomach. It was always the same. The pattern was undeniable now. Angela, though, was just the housekeeper.
invisible. Her presence barely registered as she moved around the room, cleaning surfaces, folding towels. But in the silence between the doctor's conversations and Burke's insistent placement of the hand cream, Angela felt an unsettling certainty form inside her chest. This wasn't just an accident. There was someone orchestrating this. Someone who was hiding behind the veil of wealth and privilege, playing the game of poisoning without consequence. It didn't take long for Angela to begin taking action on her growing suspicions, but each small step she took felt like walking a razor's edge. Every time she got close to the truth, something pulled her back. One evening, while cleaning an adjacent room, Angela slipped closer to the door of Blackwell's suite, her heart pounding. She peeked around the corner, barely able to see the team of doctors as they clustered around Blackwell's bed. A nurse, oblivious to her presence, brushed past her in the narrow hallway. Angela froze, holding her breath, her heart racing. If the nurse had looked just a little to the left, she would have caught her snooping. She exhaled quietly, heart still hammering, and stepped back.
But it wasn't just the physical danger that rattled Angela. It was the mental game she was playing with herself. Every small risk felt like a betrayal of her family. If she was caught, she could lose her job, her only source of income. It would be over. Her children's well-being would be in jeopardy. But how could she live with herself if she did nothing? Later that night, as she wiped down the counters, the door to Blackwell's room opened again. Burke stepped out, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile polite but cold. Angela's eyes lingered on the hand cream in his hand, now held more protectively than before. Was he hiding something? She didn't have much time. Burke was one of the most powerful men in the city. The room felt suffocating. As the days went on, Angela found herself caught in a strange tug-of-war. It wasn't just the mystery surrounding Blackwell. It was something else entirely. Dr. Park, the young physician who had been quietly observing Blackwell's case from the sidelines, began noticing Angela's presence more frequently. She had started to trust him, just a little. She'd overheard him once, speaking softly with a colleague in the hallway, expressing his frustration at the lack of progress. His voice had a gentleness to it, and unlike Dr. Reynolds, he didn't dismiss Angela's presence. Sometimes he would smile at her as she cleaned, offering a quiet nod of acknowledgement. One evening, as Angela was working, Dr. Park appeared in the hallway, walking slowly toward her. He didn't look like he was rushing off to another emergency. Instead, his gaze met hers with a certain curiosity that made her pause. He had noticed her, really noticed her. "Angela," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I've seen you around Blackwell's room a lot. Is everything okay?"
Angela hesitated for a moment before replying, her mind swirling with the knowledge of what was happening in that very room. She couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. But she didn't have to. He could see it in her eyes, the uncertainty, the mounting frustration. "I'm just doing my job," she said, trying to sound neutral. But the words came out too softly, too filled with doubt. Dr. Park didn't push her, but there was an understanding between them, an unspoken recognition. Something was off with Blackwell's case, and Angela wasn't the only one who noticed. "Take care of yourself, Angela," he said, his voice quieter now. "This hospital, sometimes it's hard to figure out what's real and what's not." Her heart skipped. His words hit too close to home. She gave him a brief smile before he disappeared into the maze of hospital hallways. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were two people on the edge of discovering the same truth, and she wasn't sure if she could trust him. Was he just being kind, or was he starting to understand what she'd already pieced together? The hospital felt different now, filled with secrets and half-heard conversations. Angela continued to observe, digging deeper into Blackwell's case.
But it wasn't just the symptoms of poisoning she was uncovering. It was the quiet isolation she felt, as if she were the only one who saw the puzzle pieces falling into place. What would you do if you were Angela? Would you risk everything to expose the truth, even if it meant putting yourself in danger? Or would you stay silent, hoping someone else would notice?
Angela's quiet observations over the past few days had drawn her closer to the truth, but she still hadn't dared to speak it aloud. The pattern was undeniable. After each visit from Jefferson Burke, Blackwell's symptoms worsened. But there was something nagging at the back of her mind, something that didn't sit right with the story. Why was Burke's involvement always so precise, so deliberate? Angela had spent hours poring over Blackwell's chart, making connections between the timeline of his worsening condition and the arrival of the hand cream. The signs were clear now. She had seen the symptoms of thallium poisoning in textbooks, in old lectures, and in her own chemistry experiments. But it was more than that. The hand cream wasn't just a bystander, it was the delivery system for the poison. She spent an entire night piecing together the details, each patient log, each report from the doctors. Then, her eyes landed on something she hadn't noticed before. It was subtle, a small detail, but it hit her like a bolt of lightning. Burke had been too careful. The way he placed the hand cream on Blackwell's nightstand every time he visited, insisting on positioning it just so, had become a ritual, almost a performance. But why? The answer crashed into Angela's mind with such force that it nearly knocked the breath out of her. Burke was poisoning Blackwell. It had been him all along, the same man who claimed to be Blackwell's friend, his supporter, the one who was there in his most vulnerable moments. Angela's heart raced as the pieces fell into place. Burke wasn't just visiting as a compassionate friend, he was the architect of Blackwell's demise. The poison was in the hand cream, the perfect delivery system, subtle, slow, and undetectable until it was too late. Angela's breath caught in her throat. She was shaking, her hands suddenly cold, as she reached for the jar of hand cream that had been sitting innocuously on the counter. This was it. She had the proof. It was all coming together. Burke had made sure no one would suspect. The cream was so innocent-looking, so harmless. But Angela knew better. She could feel the weight of the discovery pressing down on her chest. The room seemed to close in on her as she stood frozen, the jar in her hand trembling ever so slightly. Could this really be happening? How had she missed it? All these days, all these moments, and it was Burke the entire time.
Her mind spun with the implications of her discovery. The man who was supposed to be a friend, the one who pretended to care, was the one orchestrating Blackwell's slow death. Angela's vision blurred for a moment, her hands shaking as she set the jar back on the counter. She could feel the pounding in her temples, the dizziness from the rush of realization. She had the evidence. But could she prove it? The stakes had just skyrocketed. If she was wrong, if she couldn't back this up, she would lose everything. Her job, her credibility, and maybe even her chance at a better life for her children. The betrayal ran deeper than just Blackwell. She had trusted Burke's facade too, and now she realized it had all been a lie. Her chest tightened as she struggled to breathe, to think straight. What could she do now? The world she'd been trying to remain invisible in had suddenly come into sharp focus, and Angela had no choice but to act. Angela's pulse thudded in her ears as she replayed the details in her mind. Burke's visits, the hand cream, the worsening symptoms, the slow, insidious poisoning. She had seen it before, back in her chemistry textbooks, but this time it wasn't just theory, it was real. And it wasn't just Blackwell's life on the line now, it was hers too. Her heart raced as the weight of the decision settled over her. She had to act. But what if she was wrong? What if the doctors were right and it was just a coincidence? What if exposing Burke made her the one to blame? The risks of being wrong were unimaginable. Could she afford to take this gamble? Her hands were still trembling as she reached for her phone, intending to call Dr. Park. But her finger hesitated over the number. What if he didn't believe her? What if he thought she was just a housekeeper with wild theories? No one was going to listen to her unless she had proof, something concrete. She couldn't rely on anything less.
And then there was the question that gnawed at her. Could she really expose Burke? A man with so much power and influence, a man who could easily destroy her life with a single word. He had manipulated the situation, controlled the narrative, and now Angela had to confront him. Her stomach twisted in knots. If she did this, there was no turning back. She could lose everything. Angela's thoughts raced as she stared at the evidence in her hands, still processing the enormity of what she had uncovered. The mystery was unraveling, but now it was her turn to act. Were you surprised by the twist? The man pretending to be Blackwell's friend, the one who seemed so harmless, was actually behind the poisoning all along? Do you think Angela's making the right move, or is she risking too much? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think the truth is worth the risk? Would you dare to expose someone with so much power, even if it meant losing everything? Imagine being in Angela's shoes. She's a housekeeper, overlooked, invisible to the very people whose lives she might save. But what if the real betrayal isn't just what Burke has done? What if it's how society views people like Angela, the ones who are dismissed and ignored, only to find out their knowledge, expertise, and critical thinking could have saved lives all along? The shocking truth is that Angela, someone without a formal medical degree, saw something that doctors failed to see. Should we rethink how we perceive people in service roles? How many people are out there, invisible, with untapped potential, simply because they don't have the right credentials or title?
But then, what about the doctors? They are the trained professionals, the ones with years of education and experience, and yet they missed the poisoning that someone with a cleaning cart noticed. Could it be that we place too much value on credentials and overlook what truly matters? The ability to see, the willingness to listen, and the courage to act, no matter your position? Does a title or a white coat truly make someone more capable of spotting the truth? Or have we created a system that rewards conformity over true observation? Let me know in the comments what you think. Angela's heartbeat echoed in her ears as she stepped into the sterile security office. The harsh fluorescent lights above flickered, casting shadows that seemed to grow longer, darker with every passing second. She felt it, the weight of the system pressing in, suffocating her. Her heart clenched as she met the cold gaze of Officer Daniels, the hospital security guard who had watched her for weeks, his eyes always tracking her like a hawk. "You've been interfering with hospital procedures, Miss Beaumont," Officer Daniels said, his voice low but firm, the kind that left no room for argument. "I've had complaints from the medical staff. You're crossing boundaries, and if you don't stop, we'll have to take this further." Angela's stomach dropped, her face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. Was she wrong? Had everything she had worked for, the sleepless nights, the quiet observations, the slow build-up to this moment, been in vain? They wouldn't listen. They never would. She had risked everything: her job, her reputation, and her family's future. All for what? To be dismissed again? She stood frozen in the sterile office, her eyes burning with frustration and doubt. Officer Daniels' words echoed in her head, the weight of them crushing her resolve like a vice. How could she fight a system that had already decided she didn't matter? As the door clicked shut behind her, Angela stood in the hallway, her body shaking. The tears she had been holding back threatened to spill, but she wouldn't let them. No one would see her cry.
She had always kept her emotions locked away, buried beneath the weight of the life she had to live. But now, for the first time in a long while, she felt the familiar sting of invisibility, the invisibility she had fought so hard to escape. She fought back to her younger self, the chemistry student who dreamed of changing the world, the woman who had once believed in herself. Where had that confidence gone? Was it all just a dream? Her mind flashed back to the night of the accident, the moment when her parents died and her world shattered. The world had never been kind to her. She had no privilege, no title, no one to fight for her. She had fought her entire life to be seen, to make a difference. But what if, in the end, it didn't matter? What if all her sacrifices were for nothing? The hospital, the doctors, the world, they had all dismissed her, and maybe she was just as invisible as she had always been. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her head. "Angela, you can't change the world. The world is bigger than you." The familiar voice that had always reminded her of her place. But was her place here, in this sterile hallway, too afraid to speak the truth? Could she really risk everything again? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of the dark fog of doubt. She fumbled to pull it out, her hands still trembling from the encounter with security. It was a text from her daughter, Tasha. "Mom, how's work? You okay?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. How was she supposed to answer that?
Her children had already suffered so much. They knew nothing of the turmoil she faced, the crushing weight of the choices she had to make. Tasha, only 14, already had to shoulder responsibilities Angela had never wanted for her. Marcus, her son, was barely a teenager, but already his eyes held the same tiredness Angela had seen in herself when she was his age. She had promised them that things would get better, that they wouldn't have to suffer like she did. But here she was, facing yet another wall, another dead end. What was she doing to them? The thought crushed her. She had spent years building up a semblance of a life for them, and now every choice she made felt like it could unravel everything. Could she continue this fight? Was it worth risking their security, her only constant, to uncover the truth? What if she failed? What if this was another wasted effort, another promise broken? Her fingers hovered over the phone screen as her vision blurred. The text blinked back at her, and for a moment, Angela's throat constricted, tears threatening to spill again. But she swallowed them down, the bitter lump in her throat too big to ignore. She typed back a simple message. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'll be home soon." But Angela knew that wasn't the truth. She wasn't fine. And no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, she couldn't see a way out. The night was quiet. The only sound the steady hum of hospital machines in the background. But Angela's mind was anything but still. After days of doubting herself, of wondering if risking everything had been a mistake, something inside her clicked. The fire inside her that had long been smothered was reigniting. She felt the familiar spark of her old self, the Angela who once knew things, the woman who thrived on questions and challenges. She stepped into the small supply closet, locking the door behind her. The dim light overhead flickered, but it didn't matter. She could almost hear the old classroom noises, the sharp click of the chalk on the board, the careful way she measured out chemicals in the lab. Her heart raced as she reached for a few items, things she had learned to use in her earlier years, but never thought she'd need again. It wasn't just the cleaning supplies in her hands now. It was a plan, a strategy, a way to prove what she had known all along.
She pulled a vial from a shelf, examining it carefully. It wasn't much, a simple reagent, one she had used in her chemistry classes to test for various substances, but it was exactly what she needed. She had been watching, learning, and now she would use the same knowledge that once set her apart to force the truth into the light. The antidote for the slow poison ravaging Blackwell's body was a complex antidote that needed to be synthesized carefully, and Angela knew how to make it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Angela believed again. She wasn't just the invisible housekeeper. She wasn't the woman who cleaned up after others. She was the woman who could save lives, who could stand up and make a difference, even if no one else believed in her. With steady hands, she mixed the chemicals. It wasn't the precise lab work she'd once done at Johns Hopkins, but it was close enough. She could feel it now, the pull of purpose. This wasn't just about Blackwell anymore. This was about her, about reclaiming the woman she once was. Angela stepped back from the makeshift lab station she had set up, staring at the small test tube in her hands. She had done it. In the dim light, it felt like the weight of everything she had sacrificed, the years of silence, the years of being overlooked, had been for something. Her hands were steady, not trembling anymore. Her posture had shifted. Gone were the hunched shoulders and the small, timid movements. Angela stood tall, her back straight as she watched the solution settle in the test tube. Her voice, too, had changed. The way she spoke, even to herself, had a firmness to it now. No more hesitation, no more quiet doubts. She could hear her own voice in her head, stronger than it had been in years. You know what you're doing. You have the answers. Angela held the test tube up to the light. It wasn't much, just a small step, just a start. But it was the first time in a long while she felt like she was in control of something.
She smiled, the first real smile she had felt in days. Her growth wasn't just in the work she was doing, it was in the person she had become. A woman who had been beaten down, dismissed, and overlooked was now standing in a hospital storage room crafting a solution that could save a life. The quiet housekeeper was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly who she was and exactly what she could do. She wasn't just fighting for Blackwell anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the person she used to be, and the person she had to be in this moment. She could do this. As she exited the closet, Angela's steps were faster, more confident. There was no looking back. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was about to show them all. She had the answers, and no one could ignore her now. Angela stood outside Blackwell's suite, a small, unassuming envelope in her hand. But inside that envelope was everything she needed, everything she had worked for. Her heart beat steadily in her chest, calm, controlled, as if she had already won. For once, she wasn't hiding in the shadows. She wasn't cowering in fear of being overlooked. Today, she was the one with the answers, and she knew it.
She opened the door to Blackwell's room, the medical team already gathered around the bed. Dr. Reynolds was there, of course, with his usual air of arrogance. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as Angela stepped in. He hadn't noticed her before. He would notice her now. "Angela," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice dripping with indifference. "What is it? This is a serious matter. We don't have time for—" Angela cut him off, her voice firm, unwavering. "No, you don't have time for this, but I do." The room fell silent. The other doctors turned their eyes toward her, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected intrusion. But Angela didn't flinch. She walked toward the bedside with purpose, pulling the envelope from her pocket and placing it on the table with deliberate care. She opened it slowly, letting the room feel the weight of the moment. "I've been watching, listening, and I've figured out what's really going on with Mr. Blackwell. It's not what you think." Dr. Reynolds scoffed, his eyes scanning her with disdain. "Angela, this is a hospital. We're professionals here. We've run all the tests. What exactly are you suggesting?" Angela didn't flinch. Her confidence had shifted. She opened the documents inside the envelope, the evidence. It wasn't just her words anymore. It was proof. She pointed at the test results, the chemical analysis that she had painstakingly compiled. "It's thallium poisoning," she said, each word deliberate, each syllable precise.
You've missed it all along because no one thought to test for it. But I did. I know the symptoms. I know the science. And this," she tapped the paper sharply, "proves that the poison is coming from the hand cream Burke has been bringing in." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward, frowning, dismissing the findings with a wave of his hand. "Impossible," he muttered, his brow furrowed. "This is nonsense."
The tension was unbearable, thick as smoke in the room. Angela was calm, resolute. The other doctors looked at each other, uncertain, their initial skepticism starting to waver. But Dr. Reynolds wasn't ready to give up his control so easily. "No, you're wrong," he snapped, his voice rising. "You're a housekeeper, Angela. You're not a scientist. You—" Before he could finish, Angela raised a hand, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "I'm more than what you see." The room fell completely silent. Her words hung in the air, a challenge, a truth that couldn't be ignored anymore. Angela took a deep breath and turned to the nearest doctor, who was now examining the documents she'd presented. He looked up at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "Angela, this matches. These numbers, they match the symptoms we've seen in Blackwell. It's exactly what you said." The realization hit him hard, his face drained of color. He looked back at Dr. Reynolds, unsure, stunned. Dr. Reynolds' face darkened as he turned to Angela. "You shouldn't have been here. You should have stayed in your place." His words were thick with frustration, but there was a tremor beneath them now, the first sign that he knew he was losing control. Angela stood taller. "I know my place, Dr. Reynolds, and I've earned the right to be here. You just didn't see me before." The room seemed to hold its breath as the doctors examined the evidence. The wheels of realization began turning. The tide was shifting.
Blackwell's life was in Angela's hands now. Dr. Reynolds finally spoke, his voice tight, his tone faltering. I was wrong. You were right. You've saved his life." It was a soft apology, but it was an apology nonetheless. The kind Angela had waited for her entire life. She had proven herself. No longer just the overlooked housekeeper, she was the reason Blackwell was going to survive. Then, in an unexpected moment, Blackwell himself woke up, his eyes flickering open. He looked around, disoriented, but then his gaze landed on Angela. There was gratitude in his eyes, a deep, quiet gratitude that said everything words couldn't. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for saving me." Angela blinked, a lump forming in her throat. This moment, this was her victory. Not just for Blackwell, but for her, for everything she had worked through, everything she had endured, everything she had fought for. She had done what no one thought possible, what no one believed she could do. The doctors nodded, some of them looking at her with a new sense of respect. Dr. Reynolds gave her a small, reluctant nod, his face still flushed with the sting of his own humiliation. But Angela didn't need their recognition. She had already won. She had proven herself, not just to them, but to herself. She had shifted the system. She was no longer invisible.